Okay, let's talk about 2025. It was a massive turning point for the entire global mobility industry. You know, the whole era of growth at any cost? That was officially over. And in its place, a huge divide opened up. The industry basically split into two camps, each with a totally different playbook, a different philosophy, and a very, very different future. So, the big question we're tackling in this explainer is pretty simple. What exactly went down in 2025? Why did this split even happen? Who actually came out on top? And maybe most importantly, what can their strategies tell us about who's going to win the next decade? Let's break down how this great divide happened and what it really means going forward. At the very heart of this split is a really simple but powerful idea. On one side, you've got the platform players like Uber. They're built on code. Their real value is their digital network, their algorithms, their brand. But on the other side, you've got the fleet operators like Hertz, built on metal. Thousands of actual cars that depreciate, the maintenance shops, the physical parking lots. That is the central fight right there. Asset light versus asset heavy. Here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll dive into the battlegrounds between metal and code. Then we'll look at the external pressures that are squeezing literally everyone. After that, we're going to open up the professional's toolkit for spotting financial red flags. And finally, we'll look ahead to what's next for the industry. Okay, let's jump right into that first major battleground, metal versus code. And honestly, the best way to understand this fight is to just follow the money. Look at where these companies are choosing to place their bets for the future. And this is where it gets really telling. Just look at R&D spending. The tech platforms, your Lyfts and Ubers, they're pouring 14% and 7% of their gigantic revenues right back into code, AI, and their digital platforms. But then look at Sixt, who's a real innovator on the metal side of things. They spend less than 1%. This isn't just a small difference. It's a completely different philosophy about where growth is actually going to come from. For the code camp, the end game is all about becoming a super app. Think Uber, Grab, or Didi. They might start with getting you a ride, but the real goal is to expand into everything: food delivery, groceries, shipping, even financial services. And why would they do that? To own the user. The data is crystal clear on this. An Uber customer who uses both rides and delivery ends up generating over 3 times the gross bookings. That right there is the power of the digital ecosystem. Now, the metal camp, they're playing a totally different game. It's what you'd call a pure play ecosystem. Take a company like Sixt. They're not trying to deliver your pizza. Nope. Instead, they want to own every single piece of your physical car journey. From short-term rentals and car sharing to long-term subscriptions, even EV charging. Their goal is complete vertical integration to lock in customers inside their main business. And here's that pure play strategy in action. It's actually pretty brilliant. Sixt strategically uses cheaper services, like car sharing, as what they call door openers. The goal is simple: get a new customer in the door with a low-cost service, and then systematically upsell them into their more profitable core rental business. It's a masterclass in maximizing the value of a customer over their lifetime. So, what's the outcome of these two totally opposite strategies? Well, just look at this chart on human capital efficiency. It's staggering. Uber generates over $1.5 million in revenue for every single employee. Hertz? It's around $327,000. And look, this isn't about people working harder. It's about the incredible operational leverage you get from code. An asset-light model can scale across the entire globe with just a fraction of the workforce. But a company's internal strategy is only half the story. Both of these camps are also getting hammered by huge external pressures that, frankly, do not care about their business model. Let's dig into the universal challenges that are squeezing the entire industry. The biggest headache, especially for the metal camp, has been what's called the EV hangover. The whole industry just dove headfirst into electric vehicles, but the financial reality turned into a total nightmare. Why? Well, 3 big reasons. The depreciation was fast and totally unpredictable, repair costs were shockingly high, and consumer demand just never showed up in the way everyone expected. For companies whose main asset is literally cars, this was a catastrophe. And the financial damage was just staggering. Just take Avis, for example. They took a single impairment charge of $518 million in 2025. That's a $500 million admission that their big bet on certain EVs had gone completely disastrously wrong. And Avis was not alone. Hertz took a very similar, very painful hit. They had to book an extra $223 million in depreciation just to aggressively dump their own EV fleet. This shows it was an industry-wide crisis for anyone who owned the assets. They bought high and were forced to sell low, and they took a massive bath in between. On top of the car problems, every company is hitting what you could call a policy ceiling. These regulatory walls that just cap their growth. What's so fascinating is how different these ceilings look around the world. In the US, it's a messy puzzle of different state-level gig worker laws and sudden changes to federal tax credits. In China, it's a super centralized system with strict anti-monopoly rules, tough data security laws, and incredibly difficult licensing for every single car and driver. Both are huge challenges, but in totally different ways. Okay, so with all this turmoil, how can an outsider really tell which companies are healthy and which ones are just hiding the problems? This is the Professional's Guide, a practical toolkit for spotting the specific financial red flags in the mobility industry. Here's a 4-point checklist that analysts use. Number 1, you gotta scrutinize how they recognize revenue. Number 2, find out if they're misclassifying incentives. 3, check if their insurance reserves are actually adequate. And number 4, quantify their regulatory risks. Let's break those down. Okay, so the first two are all about massaging the top-line numbers. The biggest red flag, as this quote points out, is when a company takes the discounts it gives to passengers or the bonuses it pays to drivers, and instead of taking it off their revenue, they bury it in an expense line like sales and marketing. That's a big accounting no-no. It should be what's called a contra revenue. By booking it as an expense, they can make their total revenue and gross margins look way bigger and healthier than they actually are. The next two red flags are all about hiding future costs. First up is insurance. With repair costs and medical expenses going through the roof, a company's insurance reserves should be going up too. If they aren't, that's a warning sign. They're probably under-reserving just to make today's profits look better, kicking a giant liability down the road. Same thing goes for legal issues. If a company is facing major lawsuits or fines, they need to be setting that money aside. If they're not, it's a huge red flag. All right, so we've seen the battle lines, the external pressures, and the accounting tricks. So now, let's look forward to the industry's next frontier. Where is all of this headed? Well, it really comes down to 3 things: data, automation, and a new hybrid strategy called asset right. You know, the most powerful long-term advantage for the code platforms is something called the data flywheel. Take Didi with its almost 750 million active users. Every single trip out of billions generates data. That data is used to train their AI to get smarter at routing, pricing, and matching drivers. A better service attracts more users, which generates even more data, and the wheel just spins faster and faster. It's a compounding competitive advantage that the asset-heavy guys just can't copy. So in response to the crazy high costs of owning metal and the risks of being just code, a much smarter hybrid model is starting to emerge, the asset-right strategy. The whole goal is to keep capital investment as low as possible while still having control where it really matters. A great example of this is Xiangdao Mobility in China. They only own their own fleet in core cities where licenses are restricted and supply is tight. Everywhere else, they just use local partners. It's really the best of both worlds. And the ultimate test for all these strategies is going to be the robo-taxi race. This is where everything comes together. You see Xiangdao using its massive network of human drivers as a data-gathering machine to train its self-driving AI. You see Uber making huge hardware commitments. And this is also where you see some major vulnerabilities. Lyft, for instance, sold its autonomous division, so now they are completely dependent on third parties. That could be a fatal weakness if a competitor rolls out a cheaper, proprietary network first. And all of this leads us to the final critical question. As autonomous robotaxis actually become a reality, will they finally put an end to this whole metal versus code debate, or will they just make it even more intense? Does the winner need to be asset right, with a flexible mix of owned and partnered assets? Or does the ultimate winner need to be asset everything, controlling the hardware, the software, the network, and the data? That is the multi-trillion-dollar question that is going to define the entire next chapter of mobility.